What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Matthew. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Matthew. And boy, do we have a special guest. Matt Fleissig is in the house. What's up, Matt?
Hey, what's happening?
Oh, man. I always tell people, don't play me at more than 1 times speed for the intro, or else you're not going to be able to understand a word I'm saying. So not much, man. How are you doing?
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm lucky enough to be in New York City tonight as we're doing this. So pumped to be on the show. And thanks again for having us.
Yeah, I'm really, really pumped to have you. I saw in the background. I'm like, that looks like NYC. So cool, man. Are you in Northern Jersey? Or are you in New York City most of the time?
I live in Northern Jersey, and then we have an office in Englewood, New Jersey, and in Manhattan proper, New York City.
Awesome, man. So the audience is like, all right, Darius has another wealth guy on the show. And you guys know, like the audience knows, I'm like the most selfish person when it comes to show. And so when I started the podcast, I was like, hey, I want to meet cool people. And then when we started doing Rise, I was like, I'm in wealth now. I should go like talk to all the big badasses in wealth. And your firm, I had heard a lot of people talk about Pathstone. It came up on the radar a lot. And I was like, well, look, let's see if Matt wants to be on the show, man. So grateful to have you here. You've done amazing work with your firm. But man, it's really excited to talk to you about, your journey from an entrepreneurial standpoint, as well as really a lot of the lessons you learned along the way. But before we go there, would you mind if I gave a little bit of your formal bio for audience members that maybe don't know much about you? Cool. Yeah. So you guys, Matt is the co-founder and CEO of Pathstone. They're the number 9 in Barron's top 100 RIAs, which, as you all know, is wealth management firms, independent wealth management firms, with over 112 billion in assets under management, soon to be over 160 billion. They have a large acquisition in the works. He's a member of YPO and all-around badass entrepreneur. So, Matt, welcome to the show. Would love if you wouldn't mind. Our audience, we're learners, we're seekers. I call the TGM audience human maximizers. Would love it if you would give us, some of your background. How did you get to where you got to?
Yeah, no. First, again, thank you for the kind intro, and I hope by the end of this you'll say Pathstone is not just another wealth firm; it's a real disruptor with what we're looking to do, and it's like no other firm that you've heard or seen before. So nice. I was lucky enough to fall into this. Don't make fun of me, but I was a computer nerd at heart, computer science and economics background, and I ended up getting into it because I was writing code to confirm IPOs on E-Trade in college. It might have hurt my freshman year a little bit. Don't ask me for my transcript. Don't ask for that later. But that's where it started. It was a wild time in the late 90s. Maybe you can compare it to kind of the AI craze that we're seeing now. Obviously, it's a little bit of a different story. And just fell into it, loved what I was doing. And I'll just say that I started with an amount of money that peaked at a phenomenal amount of money, and I learned my lesson because I put everything I earned into Cisco and Lucent. And if you remember what happened there, I ended with the amount of money. So that was my single greatest lesson that I could ever explain to you was starting out in the field in that matter. There was on-campus recruiting from a firm called Lord Abbett. Lord Abbett today is a large ultra high net worth and institutional money manager. I went from being a computer nerd to there were no jobs, if you remember, in early 2000 after the bubble burst, and certainly not technology jobs. And I took a flyer on on-campus recruiting for a wholesaler. So going from computer nerd to the single most out of my comfort zone thing that I could physically explain to you, and took a job, lucky enough, at Lord Abbett as a wholesaler. They put you through crazy sales training, pep talks in the morning. Like when you wake up, like this is how, if you think you're tired, it's in your head. Like things I was just like really like stuck with me my entire life. The Series 7, my favorite was and I don't remember if it was exactly a 94 or a 96. I just remember the head of sales telling me like, Matt, like you're only supposed to get a 70 on this test.
Yeah. Come on. Passing is winning.
And he's like, Fleissig's never going to be able to sell. He did too well on this test. Get out of here. And so it was just an awesome experience. We were calling brokers around mutual funds, working with a great team, awesome culture and things I learned. Like everyone wore a white shirt and striped tie every day. You literally got sent home if you wore like a blue shirt or something else along those lines.
Oh my God.
And so I'll just say that was like a lesson that has taken with me forever. Fast forward, I was lucky enough, one of my buddies and wholesalers left to go to a firm called ACO, which is owned by Goldman Sachs. And they were looking for more business development focused people at the time. And while I was there, I randomly met twist of fate, a gentleman named Steve Braverman. His family invented the powder-free latex glove during the AIDS crisis.
Wow.
So anytime you see a purple or turquoise glove, that's Steve's family. He was looking to start this thing to be a single family office for multiple families. And I was at a barbecue where both of our families have a place in the Catskills. And he said, hey, can you do asset allocation? And I was like, yeah, I could do asset allocation. And I never dreamt. Went in that next Monday. We talked. It was me, him, and one other person. Never dreamt it would start from where it was, but there was no technology. It was like using coding again from scratch, building macros, Visual Basic and Excel. And we started building this really unique firm with another co-founder named Alan Zachariah in Atlanta. And we had another 4 other original shareholders that we started this firm and convinced families to join us of this vision of how do you create a single family office for multiple families. Everything was under, even in the beginning, it was like 6 pages of stuff we could do. Taxes, in-house, accounting, bill pay, investments, performance reporting, buy the planes, hire the pilots, background check the dog walker. If you could dream it, we could do it. And all we've done, so it's been 17 years now since I originally met Steve and Alan and my other co-founders, and just an awesome journey. We officially started Pathstone in 2010, so it's 14 years since we started our own company, and I'm having more fun now than I could ever fathomly explain to you, and I feel like I'm in some kind of simulation or Sim City, the video game, if you remember that, of what we're trying to build and what's happening in the industry.
That's so cool, man. So when you, you obviously kind of pivoted. It's funny when you're talking about that because we're kind of similar in age. So I was like, oh yeah, there was no jobs and no one. And I was like, I think I invested in both Lucent and Cisco. I also did Webvan and Red Hat. So
nice. Were you a gamer? Darius, were you a gamer also?
Oh, I was not a gamer, but I definitely was. I had like $3,000 I had saved up from bouncing at a nightclub, and I lost. My worst trade was I bought a bunch of Apple at like $20 a share, and then it went down to like, I don't know if you remember this, like 01 or 02, it went down to like $7 a share, and then when it got back up to 22, I sold it. I had like 100 shares of Apple. Yeah, I was like, oh man, I got my money back. Let me get the hell away from this thing. Like, this is like not when it was very far away from the Apple that we know today.
Hey, listen, like you were having cooler experience. You were bouncing in a nightclub, and I was playing like Quake 2 and Counter Strike. So I feel like it was you might have been having more fun. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you never know.
No. It was some of the nightclubs could be fun, but yeah, no, I did. You did better than me on my 7 though. I got an 81 on my Series 7. So
that means you're a better salesman than me. That's what it means.
Oh shit! So you guys started. Tell me a little bit about this, like, because I have a lot of friends who have done similar things and taking on big families and really being kind of the MFO for them. Like, how when you guys started the firm in 07, how much in assets did you guys bring in from like the founding families?
Steve's family. It's we originally the first. I'm trying to go through the math on this. From 06 to 2010, when we started, we had 19 families at that time in 2010. And that was at $1.4 billion in assets when we formally launched the firm. So it was 7 shareholders, 19 team members, 19 clients, and we launched in February of 2010.
So for our audience that's not super familiar with like a single family office or multifamily
Yeah.
office, and even what Pathstone is now, kind of give us maybe an overview of what are these different things for listeners who are they understand what wealth management is, but they're not necessarily understanding all like what your current business is. You're very big. You guys over $100 billion of assets.
Yeah.
You guys do a ton of stuff from a family office perspective, and then much more. But yeah, give us kind of an overview of what the business is, and then take us back to the beginning of
Yeah.
like what did it start at.
So traditionally, which is kind of interesting, large families, especially on the, I'll say the turn of the century of your entrepreneurs, like the best example is the Rockefellers, right? And I think, you had large families where instead of potentially sending your business to like a Merrill Lynch and a JP Morgan and various things like that, you would insource all of your own team members. So you'd have a CIO, a chief investment officer, a CEO, your COO would kind of be like your head of operations and, transfer money and everything along those lines. And I would say that, I'll say in 2006, 2007, when I jumped into this family office world, if you had $100 million or above, you typically saw folks staffing internally. And that was really before the dawn of where I'll say the business idea of Pathstone was to fractionalize it. We're not NetJets, but if you kind of think about it, you can either choose to buy your own plane and have your own mechanics and, do all your own maintenance, or you can take a fractional on NetJets and in theory, have different levels of safety records, not worry about who the maintenance team is and positioning of the plane, et cetera. And that was a little bit of the visioning of what we were trying to do at that time, was to say, how can we provide a better, more sustainable product than a single family office, or work with single family offices on outsourcing various needs. And I say what we saw there, which is super important to the beginning, is we decided to unbundle the business from the very start. So everyone in wealth management is used to paying, like, I'm paying 50 basis points. I'm paying 70 basis points, 0.7% on your assets. What we did is we said, all right, we know there's these large families that we're going to work with, and that's the business. So again, the 19 families, $1.4 billion, you were talking about an average client, right about $100 million. And so what we did is say, what do you actually want to consume? And if you only want tax and accounting and investment reporting, great, we have you covered. And so we would charge retainer-based fees based on what you wanted to consume. At the same time, if someone did come for a basis point relationship on investments, we would do that. But all of these other services that you're thinking of, philanthropic advisory, prenup, postnup, you name it, go buy a horse ranch, do the due diligence, do the payroll on the 10 cowboys and the accounting on the 40 horses. That's all retainer-based services. So that unbundling, I'll just say, was something that was pretty pivotal. When I think back to the design of the business, it's still that way today, except we now have 16 pages of things that we do versus 6. And as time went on, it was just interesting to watch. All of a sudden, to have your own single-family office, it became more like $2 or $250 million, then became $500 million. I'd say today, unless you have more than $2 billion, you're not typically seeing as much as the single-family office space, because it's an isolating job. You're not seeing the world. If someone quits who is doing your bill pay, do you want to have to rehire them? There's not a lot of technology. The part that will shock you as you're looking at this, and it blows my mind, is I'm going to say like 90-something% of the families, I would say 99, but to couch myself, over 90% of the families we meet with, they're in Microsoft Excel. And so, yes, there's different reporting technologies out there like Adapar and Tamarack, but you need people to staff them and to work on them. And so most of the families we see, it's in the Stone Ages or the Dark Ages of what they're looking at. And I'm not saying that Pathstone has invented fire, right? But like, that is kind of like when someone meets us, we're able to put these things into systems and databases and all of these different things. And all of a sudden, if you have 386 private equity investments, we're able to manage it, cap calls, distributions, you name it. And again, still unbundled. So you could, a lot of the times, I'd say half our clients are ultra high net worth. The other half are family offices, where they'll outsource certain functions to us. And then we also work with a number of institutions as well.
So when we look at those three different cohorts, obviously the institutions are going to come to you guys for. It sounds like, are they doing the unbundling as well, or is it
Yes.
really more around like
No,
CIO
it's
type stuff?
unbundled as well.
So we got endowments coming for some of the services. It sounds like obviously you guys have 16 pages of services. I want to ask about that in a second because I'm curious. And then secondarily we have ultra high net worth. So what's like kind of the average like assets under management for those folks?
The average post our acquisition, which should close at the end of the year, our average family office client, which makes up about 93% of our assets of the business, averages at $170 million.
And that's obviously a pretty good sized number for folks that are below that. And what would you say the medium number is? Because I'm sure there's some big dogs throwing that off.
Yeah, we have. I'll give you the math. I have the average for you. I don't have the median.
Okay.
No, I'm saying the average is 170. We have 750 families that average north of 100. So I think your median is probably a little closer to $100 million.
Got it. And then we have family offices who are clients as well. And so those are folks where they have their own family office, but they want to fractionalize certain services through that 16-page offering. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, there's a family that we work with where we're the outsourced chief investment officer. There's a family office we work with where they have a chief investment officer and we're the investment conscience. We have a relationship with a very large single family office where we're doing their accounting, bill pay, family office structuring, taxes, accounting, and they handle their own investments, but we do all the performance reporting. So
interesting.
It's meant to be this very open-ended, flexible business model. And what happens is you become, this is the important part, you become this very trusted person as part of this family. And I look at our team members and our professionals that are here. This is still an apprenticeship-like role. Like you can't hire someone, randomly from Morgan Stanley and say, can you go do this? What we train in-house, we also combine with firms over time who have like-minded professionals who've worked with $100 million plus families as well. Ton of education, ton of leadership training. We have Pathstone University.
Nice.
So there's all these things that we do to kind of train people how to work with these types of clients. And we know it's rarefied air, but we think it's one of the most underserved markets that you can find. And it's a blue ocean from here of where we go. And we have 750 clients, the average north of $100 million. But there's 100,000 families in the U.S. that have north of $100 million. And there's 230,000 families in the U.S. that have more than $30 million. So we have no market share, right? It's a complete blue ocean. And all the assets, you'll find this fascinating, and probably back to your and Joe Duran's business plan here, all the assets are at the wirehouses and the banks.
Yep.
And so this RIA thing at 162 billion, it's almost cute compared to what's at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when I look at when we start talking about 16 pages of offerings, so I have two thoughts. Like I have one thought, which is like, here's what I'll give you my my more controversial thought, and then I'll give you my funny thought. My controversial thought is, what's the most exotic thing that's on that 16 pages?
We do keep that general. I don't have like the horse ranch and things like that in there, but it's more around most exotic thing that's in there. Obviously, we do a lot of work on planes. I don't think that's exotic anymore as we continue to move forward. I'd say the post-nup negotiation is probably that's the nastiest, hottest one I'll put out there. And we do it. The other one, you'll like this. We call it dissolution services.
Okay.
That is where we will work with the divorcee through the process to get them through the divorce over a period of time. And our hope is we become their advisor. We don't always, but very often we do. So we changed. We didn't want to write like divorce services, so we thought dissolution services sounded a little friendlier. Yeah, if you've negotiated a post-nup and you navigate divorces, we have you covered. We can. I mean, selling businesses, right? Like helping on the investment bank. That's easy, right? That's But we do family retreats. we do, we'll write mission statements for foundations. We'll do grant negotiations. It really, and it's all real. It's not like, I have a guy, right? Like who can do
Right,
this.
right. No, it's you guys.
We do it. Everything we do is internal and in-source. The only thing we outsource is medical billing because of some HIPAA regulations. And purposely our security services are outsourced. We haven't hired any Navy SEALs yet to come in and do that. That is something that's outsourced on the security side.
There's a YPO, or are you using the guy out of Vegas that has that massive security service? I'm forgetting his name, but I met, you know what I'm talking about? He's a huge, like really crazy like security service for like they do international stuff. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know you're talking about. We happen to use someone. His name is Paul Violas from Risk Strategies. He's just been. We worked with him for over a decade. He's unbelievable.
That's awesome. All right, so now I'm going to go to my other question. So as an entrepreneur, I was like, all right, there's like In-N-Out Burger where I got my like one, like you can have like two things, fries and burgers and shakes. And then there's Cheesecake Factory where it's like they give you a menu that's like the size of an encyclopedia. So when you said 16 pages, I was like, man, that's a lot of offerings. Like one from I guess from a perspective of scaling that, and you guys have scaled. That's the other. So my question mark is, I'm like, man, how can you be that good at so many different things? Like, what is the philosophy around I get that, like, hey, we are building a product for an underserved market of very, very wealthy people who want a lot of different things, a lot of different ways, which that, like, at least that's what I'm reading from someone that says that we have 16 pages of offerings. The question I would have is, how do you make sure you do those things well?
So I love where you're going with this. First of all, I love In-N-Out Burger, and the secret menu is all huge fan of that as well.
Yep.
But we're not Cheesecake Factory. I think we're not Grand Lux either, which is like the higher end brand of cheesecake. I mean, you hire us for a real premium brand, and I'll say I don't want to say we're a luxury goods. That means you don't need it, right? But this is a premium product with a premium brand with very, very experienced people who, if you really think about it, we're selling their experiences, right? Like if you can, and it just kind of when you think about this, like. Yeah, we've delivered gold bars. We've delivered diamonds. We've done mock trials for clients. We've dealt with fraudsters pretending they tripped over your hose in New York City and are suing you, and they don't have a hose or a front door on their apartment. And so you have this collected experience of these professionals at the firm that I think is just invaluable, like full stop. The second part is, how do you scale this? Because there's typically no technology, it becomes hard to scale. But if you think about what we're doing, we're connected to 87 different custodians on overnight data feeds. So all of a sudden, you start building things. We're not doing this in Microsoft Excel. When we pay bills, we paid 87,000 bills on behalf of clients is what we're tracking for in 2024. Wow. That's not a giant sea of people with green visors on signing checks. That is all rules-based, risk-based systems where things get scanned in, different sets of approvers, custom approval rules by different vendors, all extremely systematized. There's no signing of checks when you look at that. And so as you kind of boil down each of our divisions, even on the investment side, we have a massive, massive investment on automation and tax loss harvesting. So there's some names of firms out there that I'm sure you'll know, like Aperio and Parametric and things like that. And, you can say, here's the Russell 1000 or the S&P 500 and do the tax loss harvesting. Phenomenal firms, phenomenal product. What we've taken that a step further is why not loss harvest every single holding that you own in all of your entities? Every ETF, every piece of fixed income, closed-end funds, large cap, mid cap, international, mutual funds, you name it. And loss harvest that every single day and add tax alpha to the entirety of your portfolio. And by the way, it also auto rebalances. And when we want to make changes to the asset allocation, every client and account is custom. So it's not a model, but you can make adjustments in mass at the client level. And you've just created efficiencies that can't be explained. You're not hunting and pecking for tax lots, right? Like you're not doing rebalances by hand anymore. So what it allows you to do is if you add automation to bill pay and accounting, you add automation on the investment side. On the processing side, when people join us, we've centralized a lot of the resources that you would expect around wires, account opening, trades, et cetera. It allows you to then work more closely with your client to deliver these experiences that you have. And that's the goal of the, I'll say, internal automation that we do. On the outside, this may sound right, wrong, or indifferent, but the clients we work with, whether someone typed in the financial statements in Microsoft Excel line by line, or they got it in a fully automated fashion, they're not focused on the technology. They're focused on how are we saving them time?
Mm-hmm.
How are we allowing them to live their preferred life? And how do we seam around corners and create all these moments that matter that we just talked about? So that's where we use automate. The answer is technology, automation, et cetera, on the inside that allows us to be crazy high touch on the outside and let it be scalable. And the more automation on the inside, the better service that you can provide to clients.
Yeah, I love that high tech, high touch, right? Like that,
Yeah.
that's really like where my head went, and you said those words. So for yourself, like let's go on the entrepreneurial side of this. Like you started the firm, obviously you guys got a founding group of families. You're over $1 billion in assets. Probably thought, hey, we're doing pretty well, and then you guys like really like loaded up the rocket ship and shot into orbit. I mean, walk us through like when you first started, how many people were on the team, and where are you at right now?
So if you when we started, we were 19 people, 19 clients. The business grew this model of the single phone call to get everything done. It grew incredibly rapidly. I will tell you when where we were at prior at it was called My CFO with Harris Bank. I'll just say we knew that this was a unique business model, and as we bought ourselves out of that business, we knew the demand was high, and we were building the house while we were living in it. Like we're still building the house while we're living in it. I mean, you have to constantly be changing and innovating and everything else. But what I'll say is it took off from like $1.4 billion to $4 billion in like 3 or 4 years. And it was just awesome. Right?
Wow.
Like 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We don't say no for a living. And, we just basically tripled the company in a couple of years. And we had a pretty interesting moment meeting with 2 investment bankers, husband and wife, Peter and Liz Nesvold, who are still very, very close friends of mine. And they're like, you need more adult. Like, I love what you guys are doing. We had 50 clients, 35 people. I was living in North Jersey at the time, and there was only one client in New Jersey. So we typically see folks 4 times a year. So that's 200 meetings, 200 trips a year. And Liz was like, you need some adults in the room. You need capacity. And that's when we went on a search. It was 2014. We took on our first investor to get outside capital.
Nice.
Which was an important part of what we were trying to do. And we went on a national search and found this firm in Boston called Federal Street that was also a $4 billion firm, was making about the same amount of money as us. And I learned my first MBA in M&A from a guy named Ben Robbins, who runs a firm called Tria Capital today.
Yeah.
And we acquired this firm in Boston, and Kelly, who is the top advisor there, she's now the president of the firm to this day. And so we went from, $1.4 billion to $4 billion combined in 15 to $8 billion. There was another firm of ours who joined us, who are old friends of ours. We became 10, grew it organic to 16 billion. So we 4x'd assets with the first investor. Second investor came in. So we had convertible debt to beginning. Kind of the idea is you take on debt when you don't have equity value.
Sure.
We had equity value. We took on a private equity investor in 19, and we've just been off to the races since then. And so we've taken it from 16 billion in 2019 to at the end of this year, $162 billion.
Wow, man, that's insanity.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
10x in 5 years. So you guys
now we need to do it again.
Yeah. Well, look, I like, Joe and I've talked about this a lot where like, look, you're going to have $1 trillion, RIAs. Like that's around the corner, and they're going to look a lot more potentially depending on how they're built. Obviously you guys have a very specific, mandate the way you're building your business. One question though, in the M&A, from an M&A perspective, have you guys really stayed true to the business model of just doing the ultra high net worth family office and institutional, or have you guys taken on other people that maybe are not that avatar?
No, and I'll just say, you can look at our track record, and people we work with have big clients, large families of complex needs, and that's been an important. We have not lost our vision or what we were trying to do. And the other piece about it is we fully integrate. And so we may not be the home for everyone, right? But we're trying to build an enterprise. We're trying to build a national brand for the ultra high net worth. We believe that's what builds equity value, and also allows us to, for our team members that are here, to be a destination for your career. At the same time, it allows us to deliver a higher level of service. Each of the firms we've combined with, there's been a lot of resources and capabilities that we've added to the firm. And so we didn't have a venture arm. Now we have a venture arm. We didn't, I can go on and on and on and also not just that, it's the talent, right? Like our head of business development came from a firm in Seattle. Our head of operations, she came from a firm in Washington, D.C. Kelly, our president, she came from Boston, from a firm we bought in Boston. Our head of research also came from a firm in Boston. And I just go, when you look at all of these just stories and growth trajectories, I'm the last remaining person from legacy Pathstone on the management team. And it's really because it's a combination of really, really, really talented people coming together. And at the same time, we do have some professionals in the room, like our CFO and chief people officer, et cetera, that we've complemented. But that's been, I'll just say, part of the formula on this growth journey.
So when we start talking about a firm, and this, I think for listeners who are entrepreneurs that don't know wealth, they're like 112 billion, 160 billion. Like, how many team members is that? And I learned, this is me coming from a world where, I was managing, I don't know, $30 billion worth of lending assets. So it's a little bit different. And we had almost 1,000 team members, W2 team members. The way I look at wealth is you have the advisors, and then you have like corporate, right? The back office, right? So how many advisors do you guys have? How many corporate, and what's the total number of headcount that you currently have?
So they're post Hall Capital coming together will be about 750 people at the firm.
Wow. Okay.
Pre-Hall Capital today, we're 580-ish. And of that, there are 75 lead advisors.
Okay.
And if you think about it, for 750 family office clients. So you can kind of do the rough math when you look at that. The other part that's unique about Pathstone is that we have 150 team members who are just dedicated to services.
Yep.
And so that's also, I think, you'll find unusual in the wealth world, where those people are dedicated to client solutions, which a lot of our concierge, accounting, financial reporting, bill pay, trust services, tax services as well. So that's a very large group of the team. Of the call it 580, 150 is in services. And the balance are either supporting the lead advisors or in operations. But we have developers in-house on the Salesforce side. We have project managers in-house. And, I think that's probably just where it changed as the firm got bigger. And this is the part where scale, it's hard to argue with these things. Like, I remember when we were a $10 billion shop, that was the first time we could afford some developers. You fast forward, all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, we were talking about, should we throw $500,000 at digital marketing? Fast forward today, we're throwing there's millions of dollars involved there. Same thing on the team members. I mean, we have some, our head of our wealth planning group, or preferred life solutions is what we also like to call it. He was the head of education and governance at Fidelity. So you are able to start getting team members and bring in the resources that we never, ever, ever could have afforded without being at scale. And with scale, we can focus on technology, people, team, and then, make the right bets and risks to get to be that $1 trillion investment firm that you talked about a second ago.
Yeah, that's so interesting, man. And first of all, huge kudos to you, huge congratulations. I think a lot of times, when I exited my business, and having been like yourself, like I think it's very rare that the entrepreneur that starts, because you say yourself, you're the last legacy team member.
Yeah.
It takes a different type of entrepreneur to be the right leader at those different stages of growth. And you yourself have to grow in order for that to happen. I have a mentor that says, as goes the leadership, goes the organization. So you yourself have had to grow. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to ask you how you did, but my assumption, having been in your shoes, was I had to grow constantly.
Yeah.
I had to challenge myself constantly to be one step ahead of the company in order to continue to earn my seat as the CEO when we went from 100 to 300 to 500 to 1,000. And those are all different levels of growth that I kind of experienced, different types of organizations that we had. And the funny part was it got easier as it got bigger in a lot of ways, because to your point, just had a lot of resources. I'm like, man, I can hire the best CMO. I can hire the best CTO. They know way more than I do about what they know. My job is to be a good leader to them. So I'd love to hear like your perspective on this, because obviously you came into this as a founder, right? You didn't know, the first time you were a $10 billion firm was when you were a $10 billion firm. The first time you were a $100 billion firm was when you were a $100 billion firm. How did you think of it as yourself as the CEO and leader and founder? Like, what did you think, like, hey, I need to be X in order for this thing to be successful? What was your perspective?
First of all, I love what you're saying. And I say this internally. You have to keep reinventing yourself. I don't think there's any other way to see this. Obviously, we're all, Darius, what you did and what we're doing. Like, if you're not coachable and you can't learn, you're going to stop. And if you're not afraid you need people who are more talented to be around you than you are to make this all work. And I'll just say the realization I had, it was a couple years ago, is, people who know me, I won't be outworked, right? Like you could try, you're not going to outwork me. You're not going to take more 6 a.m. flights than me. I'm not going to be outworked. But as the firm gets bigger, that doesn't work anymore, right?
Nope.
Like you can't, write some code over the weekend. If you're doing a giant reporting transition and you want to hop in and write some code to fix it, it doesn't work anymore. And so the brute forcing, you want to roll out a new marketing plan, like you can't fly to all 23 offices and get exactly done what you want to do. And it really is this incredible challenge of how do you reinvent yourself, and how do you bring the right team members in, and how do you surround who should be in the right seats? And I'll just say, and that's some of the hardest things I'll say personally I've had to do is, you grew up in this business. These were your friends, right? And they're amazing people. And by the way, they've had amazing careers, but we've had, at the same time, who's going to elevate, who can reinvent themselves, and how do you continue to build the firm when there is no true roadmap, right? Like, we're in rarefied air, and I feel blessed and thankful for every day on this. There's only a couple other RIAs. You have creative planning. What Peter's doing is unbelievable.
Yep.
You have Edelman, you have Fisher, and you have a couple others. But, I'm going to say there's going to be 5 to 10 bigger RIAs that are going to get bigger. And as we're sitting here, they're also going to combine, right? Like,
yep.
And this path to this $1 trillion RIA, the bigger firms, I will just tell you, are talking to each other. It's literally happening as we speak. And if you can't adapt and reinvent yourself to work in different environments and work with different people, it's not going to work. And I think the biggest realization for me was when the brute forcing it, which is in my nature to be able to just out hustle, outwork, it doesn't work anymore. So now, you're laughing when I say this, you have to write strategic plans, right? Like no one likes to do that. Like we're gunslingers, right? Like what am I doing writing strategic plans? But no, I mean, like you need to sit down and write a 5-year plan. I will say that the private equity investors are just, there's places where private equity gets this bad name and like they're going to strip this thing down for parts and all this other stuff. And I think they get some of like the worst name in like the entire industry, which is unwarranted. Yeah, if the business is going badly, like they're going to do something, right? Like
sure,
that's just reality. But I will just tell you, in our growth trajectory, we've had 3 investors. They've been the biggest advocates personally that I could physically explain. What resources do you need to keep growing? Hey, we've done this before, right? Like it's not that they have a playbook because they were in this rarefied air in the RIA space, but they've done this in other industries. Sure. And so formalized board, strategic planning, It actually really helps. And then having advisors, that's the other thing that I'll just say has been incredibly helpful is one of my mentors, Ron Cordes. He was a founder at a firm called Asset Mark, which was an early,
Mm-hmm.
I'll call it turnkey asset management platform. And he was in actually in Level Minix Fund 1. We're in Level Minix Fund 5 and 6. And the ability to pull on their advisors around how we're trying to grow this business, if you're open to coaching, has been incredible. Same thing, one of their other advisors, she was the CMO of Citi and Capital One. Like, how
Wow.
do you turn that down when you have access to those types of folks? And then at the same time, the other, I'll say, private equity misnomer, which I think just blows my mind, is the ecosystem of the equity that it builds. And all of a sudden, you don't have to sell the business to have certain types of events for people to retire and other things like that. And there's also management incentive unit plans
Yep.
that I'll just say half our team members are shareholders, and
Nice.
it drives incredible behavior. Our clients love the level of shareholders that we have, and again, trial and error, reinventing yourself. How do you distribute the equity? Who are the top performing people? And how do you start creating this equity experience on top of cash comp, of creating net worth, where you could have a firm of entrepreneurs and a firm of people thinking outside the box, versus just the founder, right? Like, it doesn't work
Sure.
that way. And it's why we run flat and have really smart people who've come together to do this.
I love that, man. And yeah, it's interesting. So I came from a world where there's very little equity, private equity investment in lending, resi
Yeah.
lending specifically, because of interest rate volatility. There's a lot of debt. So a lot of people take debt. We'll raise a lot of debt to buy assets. So I raised a couple $100 million of debt to buy assets, but never took on equity partners because you don't want to sell. Like, if you have a business that is 33% ROE,
Yeah.
you're not going to trade out. You're not going to trade out at 1.1 times book. It doesn't make sense. So you're like, well, screw it. I'll just bootstrap it.
Yeah.
And so we actually brought in a private equity investor for us who's Charles Bain Capital.
Love
and
that.
great guys and great firm. And so it was my first time raising equity. And so I hadn't had that experience. Joe had a lot of experience. He did 7 rounds of private equity for United. So he's like, it's old hat for him.
Yeah.
But being an entrepreneur and coming into that, I'm assuming you even made some of the statements, like, private equity has a pretty bad reputation with entrepreneurs. And I think what's funny is now, I mean, I'm in private equity now. I am private equity.
You're the bad. Hey, Darius, you're the bad guy now.
Joe calls private equity hyenas. And I'm like, oh,
you're friendly equity. I want your reputation. You're friendly equity. I just want you to know that.
Oh, thank you. I think we are too, and mostly because we're operators, right? Like, we're entrepreneurs, right. And so my perspective is like, hey, look, like, we're here to help, but I will tell you, like, having looked at a lot of deals and having been on having the investor hat on, which is, and if you're doing M&A, so you got an investor hat on every single time you do a deal. What I found was most people that think their baby's beautiful, most people don't tell you where the bodies are buried. They probably don't even know that they have bodies buried half the time. And so once you start getting in there, you're like, hey, man, like, this isn't exactly what you said it was. And we're trying to come up with, like, an economic outcome here that makes sense around reality. Now, I'm sure there's bad actors out there. I'm sure there's people that are, take you to the wood chipper and, do things that they shouldn't do because they're trying to get a better deal. But what I've told a lot of friends and entrepreneurs, I said, look, I think that entrepreneurs don't know how to present themselves to private equity in an honest way, because they themselves barely know their own firms in the way that a private equity is looking at their firm. And then they get disappointed when the deal changes because, hey, if everything is true from what you told me, we would be doing the deal the way we said it was, but it's not all true. Things have changed. We're under the hood. We see what's really here. Here's a real price based off these facts.
And you've seen that, and the firms you've seen. I mean, listen, there was no other capital when Focus Financial came out. They were first to market. AMG was there, Focus, and Emigrant Partners.
Right.
And that was it. Like, you didn't have another choice. But it did show you that this firm of affiliates doesn't work, right? It's kind of an interesting piece. I say it didn't work. The shareholders of Focus made a lot of money over that. So let me say, it worked. But now you have firms who are if they're not these independent affiliates, the story changed, right? And
Yep.
I think that's again where you see some of these things, and what CD&R is doing there, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be an incredible business. But you're right, things changed on the people that were there.
Yeah, well, like even if you look at like a perfect example when we're talking about like the focus story is like, look, what's Colony doing right now? They're cherry picking the focus firms that make sense to integrate,
Yeah,
right? So they can have one brand instead of again, I'm going to use I'm going to use some of my Joeisms. You can have one Navy, you can have a bunch of pirates, right? And
right.
at the end of the day, it. Again, I'm an outsider coming in, so I look and I'm like, oh, this is kind of like a weird franchise model, but like the franchises don't all do things the same way, which is when they're not integrated. When they are
Correct.
integrated, it's a nice, beautiful franchise model.
And that's what, and you learn quickly those landmines or those other things you were saying about, like, we've done this 15 times, right? We haven't done it 100 times, but we've done this 15 times. And, there's kind of like this curve, right? Like there's people who are nervous. And as you exit the curve, it's kind of like, how fast can you exit that curve? You quickly see who the winners are, who people gravitate to. And we've had this, our history has been right out of the bat, because of all these new services we have. We typically have a very big first new business year right out of the gate when firms join us, which is not actually the best timing at certain times, right?
Because they're just integrating right then.
But that's where we make it work, and we create great outcomes that are there.
It's funny on this, though. I want to touch on this. Like before you said that, when we first were talking about your offering, my brain was like, I bet you they get a crazy wallet share expansion in year one.
Yes.
So, and it's because these family offices or MFOs come over and they're like, yeah, we're underinvested, we're over leveraged from an operational capacity standpoint. Like we're not delivering services the way we should because of X, Y, and Z reasons, or else why would they be? Maybe they're not all selling for that reason.
No, they need us. I mean, Darius, that's like, it's one of these things I could put my sales hat and come in, but these families need us. They're not getting the right sophisticated tax advice. They're not, I'm making this up. They have 5 homes and the mail in the 5th home isn't going to the right place.
Right.
And so when the announcement comes out, and it's before we do our boot camps and our training and all these other things that we do to get people up to speed, during the consent process, so in the RAA world, you can't just close the deal, client's consent, which is a really nice feature that the clients know what they're signing up for. And in that process, when they hear about all these things Pathstone is able to do, we get a ton of inbound, to your point, around, can you help me with that? And that's an important part. And I'll say that's a great part about getting together, because the folks in the office, they feel like it's a proof point. Like, hey, this is why I did this. We're growing. This is awesome. It also allows us to potentially take on slower growing firms at time to time, because we know that once they join us, we're able to grow the business.
Nice. So going back to the scaling of the company, you said something that we were talking about a little bit, which was this perspective of adding top talent, and you being the entrepreneur. I love, by the way you were describing yourself. I'm like, man, Matt reminds me of me. Where you're like, at the end of the day, I may not be the sharpest cookie, but I will die on my sword outworking myself, right? Because that's I could control that,
Right.
And so now as you professionalize the firm, you guys are, and you're bringing in outside cultures as you integrate them into your firm. You're kind of creating this soup of awesomeness, hopefully, inside the firm. But what I found in my experience was there's actually growing pains with that. As I bring in bigger egos, more professional people, some of them come from large corporate environments, which are maybe not used to working at a 500 person or 700 person organization, which might sound like a lot to a small company, but that's still a rather small company compared to like massive publicly traded companies, right? Like Microsoft has 200,000 employees or some crazy number like that, right? So when we look at that, as you being the leader, integrating maybe these big personalities, integrating these outside cultures, what's been the biggest challenge for you as a leader to overcome those differences?
The first thing is the fact saying no is the single hardest thing to be able to do. We've done 15 deals, but we've looked at hundreds and hundreds of deals, and we take zillions of meetings. And I will just tell you that Kelly and I spend an unbelievable amount of time making sure that the culture is right on the front end. These are people we want to bring into the fold. you and I know that like you bring in one bad actor, you'll mess up this whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's been many, many wildly financially positive deals we could have done that the culture would have been off. We also have the right investors where they just trusted us with our track record, and we earned that trust, right? It wasn't given. And wasn't said, go do the deal anyway. And I think that's part of how we picked our investors as part of this culturally aligned model. And so I say the hardest thing in the beginning is seeing something toxic before it ever happens, right?
Sure.
Now, no one's perfect, but like, and we always, you're gonna laugh, we try and always do something outside of a business meeting.
Okay.
That's where you learn what's happening.
Oh yeah,
it's,
yeah.
It's not like someone's presenting you their deck as you're sitting there. Like, let's go out and do something. And sometimes people are like, what are we doing? I'm like, no, we're going to go hang out. And that is something that even with the size that we are, we have found, to your point earlier, a second ago, getting 4 people up to speed on Pathstone is the same amount of work as 40 or 50 people, arguably sometimes more work, because a 2 or 4 person firm, they're used to kind of working by themselves, while a 30 or 40 or 50 person firm, they're used to working as a team.
Sure.
So we have chosen to do things a little bit more meaningful, unless it's in a current market where we kind of have that immediate cultural part of it. But the first piece is saying no. Like we've seen some weird stuff. We even someone even like once buttered their bread with their finger, and I'm like, we're out. Like we're out. Like I can't even make that up, right? Like, or like start saying things that are off color, and you're like, I'm out. Like you're not coming to this special home that we've built. So I would say we've had a very, very strong track record on the front end of bringing people together from different backgrounds to create something beautiful. But once you get in there, they have a Monday morning management meeting, right? Like this is a great example. Well, now you're part of this bigger firm. Should you still be having your Monday morning management meeting? And that's like the trade-off. And they fade off in time, and I think we've learned like what's controversial, what's not. And integration, it's, yeah, you can get your phones and emails set up and Salesforce, in 60 days. You're not going to get the culture, the people. That takes time. That's a multi-year project. And that's where we've just, brought in some really trusted people, I'll say friends in the industry who've helped focus on integration. And the culture side is, from the top, who are the champions of culture for Kelly and I as we continue to go down in the organization. And we're counting on those people to be the champions of culture even further. And it's also why we do a ton of purposeful intra-firm work around, we call it Path to Succeed. People actually apply. That's, I'll say someone who's in like that 26 to 32-year-old range who want to get to the next level. And they actually have a written application, and we have a year-long program, and we typically have a graduation. We did it this year in Austin, Texas with about 40 people. And we just invest in our people and everything else to do that and try and find ways to bring people together quickly. But I'm not going to say like it's not stress-free, right? If this was easy, everyone would be doing this, and it's not. And so it just takes hard work. And at the end of the day, it's building trust and building teammates, but it's working with people we want to work with. And that's the hardest part, I'll just say, is on the front end, knowing who we want to work with and not. And once we know we want to work with them, we lean in. Like there's no other way I could say, like, once we're in, you have certainty of close. We don't retrade. These are the deal. This is the terms. This is the diligence. Let's go. And that's really has served us well, I'll say, reputationally.
I love that, man. It's funny when you're talking about taking people out of the office to get to know them. I had a friend of mine that what he would do when he was interviewing like for top level people or even for acquisition is he would take people out to lunch. And what he would do is he would get there early and he would pay the server $20 and he'd say, hey, who I'm eating with, you need to purposely screw up their meal.
Or like, spill something on them.
No, it was purposely mess up their meal when they order it, bring it out the wrong way. And he would do it to see how they'd react. And if they reacted poorly, he knew that wasn't like if you act like, hey, people make mistakes, but he said that was always the ultimate test. A lot of people would get really nasty. And he's like, right away, he's like, oh, this is not the right person for me. But I thought that was kind of genius, right? Because it was like this really like weird way to like make someone show how they react when things don't go their way, which, by the way, I don't care if it's an acquisition, an integration, a sale, a deal, anything. Things aren't going to go your way sometimes. That's life, right?
And how you deal with it is and how do you plan for it? By the way, I thought you were going to say he was going to order like 3 martinis and pour him water and see what the other person did or something like that.
I like that one too. 1 for me, 2 for him. That's amazing. So, I wanted to, I know we're getting near the end of the show here. So first of all, man, I appreciate all your time. This was really fun. I love learning about the business. I have a couple of just quick questions because I have a lot of friends that look for family office services.
Yeah.
For like, what is like for maybe an entrepreneur that's not at your average company size? What's a minimum size for someone to come in and start working with your firm to get your services? It sounds like you guys are definitely for like, a creme de la creme, ultra high net worth.
And ultra high net, I would say also that ultra experience really helping on those moments that matter. But typically folks with complexity of $25 million and more are the right fit, and unbundled, and it's outsourced, and we fit in over time, and people can add and remove services depending on their needs and the way life changes and generations, and it's a very, very flexible model.
Okay, sounds good. And then, this is just myself being newer to the industry and learning and from folks like yourself that have been here a little longer. Like when you look at the future of the industry right now, there's a ton of, it's very frothy, man. There's a lot of money in the industry. There's a lot of private equity chasing deals. There's a lot of firms, strategics chasing deals. It's kind of like, you're like, it's kind of madness in some ways. Like when you look at what is your perspective on the future of the industry? Like in the next, call it 5 to 10 years, what are the major things that if you had to rub a crystal ball, if you had to say what you think is going to happen, what do you think is going to happen in the future of wealth management?
I think that there's a couple things, and I think it's happening. Some of it's happening now, some of it's 5 or 10 years from now. The first is the RIAs were originally created to be something else than the banks and the broker dealers. And the size of it has been meaningless until as we're starting to see what's happening now. The whole idea is that it was a capital F fiduciary, meaning that you really sat on the same side of the table versus a lowercase fiduciary that you might be at a bank or a broker dealer where you're getting commissions and placement fees and various other things. Nothing wrong with that, just a different model. What's surprising me to watch is the RIA space has started to grow. Is how much you're starting to see the RIAs start looking like broker dealers again. And we run a clean business. I was going to joke, maybe if you were a broker dealer, we'd have a lot of helicopters or something. But like, this is a clean business. It's what our clients, the only revenue we receive are what our clients pay us directly. We don't have placement fees. We don't double dip on alternatives. That's the new, I'm seeing that everywhere where you pay a fee now for core business and pay a fee for alts. I see now fee schedules that have you tilted towards certain asset classes that you can pay more for. It's just kind of shocking to see that that's all coming back into the space that was supposed to be this clean business. So I think you're going to see that trend continue more and more. And the reason is these are additional sources of revenue, and it's just reality, and people are going to do it. And there'll be some firms like us who are going to choose to stay clean. The other thing is I hear people always say like it's madness, it's a consolidation. I actually don't think there's any consolidation as I see this happening. There's 22,000 RIAs throughout the country and advisors. Yep. There's going to be next year there could be, I'm making up numbers, there could be 25,000, right? Like the idea that you can be a local firm, work with your community, have some clients, like it's a great business. It's a great lifestyle. Those are going to continue to be successful along with some regional firms. I think the biggest difference is this concentration that's starting to happen where you're going to get 5 or 10 large RIAs that will truly start being at scale. And I still think we're in the first or second inning at Pathstone here. I'm not sitting here saying we're at scale because we're not. Have we created some distance between us and some competitors? Sure. But if you get complacent for a second, everyone catches up to you. Yeah. And so if we're at scale, at the end of the day, what does it mean for the clients? Right? Because that's why we're doing this. And for the clients, at the end of the day, that's how you're able to provide more and more services. So sitting here today, you already threw out the shock value of $1 trillion, but I think there's one piece to it that not to leave out is, so let's just say a Pathstone and a couple other firms start getting to some significant size, and within 5 to 10 years, you have a couple $1 trillion RIAs. The banks and the broker dealers, they have very high NPS scores, right? As we're sitting here, people do like them. They have a lot of very, very large clients. I don't think they're just going to sit there and say, like, this RIA thing is great, and now there's these firms that, are almost the size of us. Like, there's going to be a reverse disruption event that's going to happen where they have a lot more money than we do. They have a lot more resources. I don't know if they acquire a couple of these firms out there and change the game again. I know Goldman tried that with your partner, United Capital. We could theorize pluses and minuses. I think it's going to happen again. And I think the wealth arm is going to get turned on its head again as the banks and the broker dealers who have infinite more resources than us are not just going to let assets bleed out the door to RIAs. And I think that's the last piece that, like, people are leaving out, that it's not just this, like, dream that these capital F fiduciaries become $1 trillion firms. These other bigger firms are not going to just take this lying down. And when that happens, to me, is the big question.
I haven't heard someone say that before. That's an interesting perspective. I love it, man. It's been a really fun conversation, Matt. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I'd love it. Right now, I want to get to the greatness question. Before I get there, though, people that want to learn more about yourself and Pathstone, where can they find you guys? And then we'll go to the greatness question.
Pathstone.com, Pathstone.com. On the contact site, we'll get back to you quickly. You actually can test it if you want. You could send me an email after, but someone will call you and quickly. So you enter something on the contact field, someone's going to call you. It's something awesome we do. And again, feel free to test it out and see what happens.
All right. Awesome. You guys, I want the audience to do it and send me your notes. I want to see what happens.
Tell me the response time. It's over 5 minutes. Like, we'll call you at 10:30 at night. I'm being serious. Like, it's we're going to call you.
All right. I'm doing it. I'm not going to tell you when. All right. You ready for greatness question, Matt?
I'm ready.
All right. What is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
I leave everything to us having this conversation to this single training at Lord Abbott of 6 months of sales training, working with people, pushing you so far out of your comfort zone. I think that's the life lesson I learned to me, is that my first boss at Lord Abbott, going through this training, said to me, when you pick up the phone, that uncomfortable feeling in your stomach is the size of your business growing. And I'll just say that has stayed with me in a way that I cannot explain. And if you're not going out of your comfort zone, you're not growing the business. And so innovators break things. It's what we do, and it's what we're growing. And so I really attribute that the massive out of the comfort zone Lord Abbott experience, and that uncomfortable feeling of your stomach is the size of your business growing. Like, end of story.
I love that, man. Man, just dropping some bombs, dropping some jewels of information. Matt Fleissig, man, my friend. It's such an honor. So much gratitude from here at the Greatness Machine for having you on. Thank you so much, my friend. We really appreciate you coming here.
Love it. Thanks for having us. It was a blast.
So much. You guys go out, check out Pathstone, send them an email around midnight on a Friday. Let's see if they respond. And no, but seriously, go check out Matt's. Thank you so much for dropping the knowledge today. Until next time, peace out, everybody. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
is my lover.